Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world as you're watching this webinar. Welcome to the second in the APAC Learning Trends webinar series, which is focusing on reverse engineering a digital experience. My name is Ben Kia. You can see my contact information, which I'll show here, and I'll also show you the contact information again in case you want to get in touch and ask any questions or dive deeper into the case study that we'll explore today. So I look after our learning solutions for Asia Pac. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I've been in the leadership and professional development space for many, many years. And more recently, I've been working with our partners around Asia to develop really cutting edge digital learning experiences for wider populations that have had a high degree of success, very effective, with really powerful stories. But also along that journey over the last 3 or 4 years, I know that there's a lot of challenges that clients are facing. So, so in this webinar, we're really going to do what it says on the tin, and we're actually going to reverse engineer a digital learning experience. And why are we doing that? Well, as some of you may be aware, and you may have already been experiencing, there are a lot of digital experiences out there, a lot of ways to engage learners, a lot of platforms, a lot of technologies. And, the reality is that it's very easy to fall into a trap where you're kind of going out and plucking platforms out of space or designing things, and it may end up leading to a loss in investment. And we can't really afford to do that because the speed at which changes are happening, the disruptions that are affecting our business, job through robotic process automation, we're going to have to reskill a lot of our organizations. That we're going to have to be making sure that our employees or our learners are agile and able to learn on the fly. We need to be able to meet learners where they're at, and we need to be able to do it quickly. We can't really go into a process where we're waiting 3 or 6 months to roll out a new experience. We need experiences that are agile, that are quick to update and ready to meet our learners exactly where they need the learning. And so, having worked with various organizations around Asia to help them meet this challenge, I know that there are a lot of barriers in place in terms of deploying this. So we're going to reverse engineer a digital learning experience starting from the beginning. But before that, I really want to get a common definition of what digital learning is. So all of us, when we jump into this webinar, we're going to make sure that we all have a common definition for that. Because it is reverse engineering, I am going to focus on the results first. What was the result of this? What does the finished product look like? And I use finished product carefully because it's an agile experience. It's an evolution. We're always tweaking it and evolving it based on a number of factors which we'll discuss. We're going to do a quick demo of the experience so you can see the finished product. And then we're going to start going backwards from there. We're going to look at the design process, and we're going to look at how the design process and how different factors that you have to consider when exploring these types of experiences, how we made those types of decisions. And so, we probably won't record the Q&A for this video. So if you're watching this later on a video, you won't really hear the Q&A. But this is what we're going to do, and I really hope that it's valuable. And by the end of this webinar, what I hope that you guys have walked away with is a knowledge of the importance of a strong design process and what that design process looks like. But also that you're aware that, a lot of people out there, a lot of partners and clients out there are facing the same challenges, and that you now have some information to start asking really good questions and to start making better decisions around how you're going to meet the learning challenges of your business and successfully deploy investments into digital learning platforms, tools, and also, of course, the resulting experiences that your learners move through. So let's start with that first question. Defining digital learning. Now, when I run this to large groups, I often ask a question, what do we mean by digital learning? And I ran this last Friday for a large group, and I gave them a poll. And what I did is I brought up these options, e-learning, read a book, classroom training, a range of different options here. And I asked them, and I want you to think about as you're listening to this video, what was your last learning experience? So as you're thinking about that, I'll share some of the results. Often the highest results that I receive are around e-learning and classroom training, with a close follow-up to maybe read a book and then YouTube video. And I'm really glad that people think of learning more than just a classroom setting or a web-based e-learning training. I'm glad that people are broadening up, because the reality is, if you really think about it, your last learning experience was probably more likely, unless you just came from a classroom session 20 minutes ago, learning from somebody informal. Watching a video on YouTube on how to fix something or cook something or do something, reading a book, seeing something on Facebook. These are the different ways that people are learning now, and the culture and the way in which people are learning is evolving. But when I think of digital learning, I don't think of just one of these things. Digital learning isn't just one of these things. Is digital learning an online e-learning course, which I've got up here? Is it gamification? Is it a virtual training like on a WebEx or a webinar? Is it watching videos online or some media consumption? Is it a classroom training? Is that digital? Is one-on-one coaching or peer discussions, is that digital? Is social learning digital? Are online assessments, checklists, job aids, are they digital? Is mobile apps and other learning tools, is that digital? Is user-generated content and sharing, is that digital? Well, the answer is that by our definition of digital learning, all of this is digital. Digital, about 10 years ago, may have meant an e-learning. A 45-minute SCORM package that gets loaded onto your LMS, and I go and I watch that, and it's compliance training or something along those lines. But it may also, you may also think of digital learning as a virtual training. It is those pieces. It can be those pieces. But what digital learning is today, and what the emergence of different technologies and platforms has enabled, is the ability to bring all the different modalities of learning and pack them together into a coherent learning experience that meets your learners at their work. It's about bringing learning into the job, and so therefore increasing the efficacy of all of those different modalities by pulling them together more effectively. So that's what we mean by digital learning. It's an experience that may use technology as its backbone to help pull together a range of things to increase and enhance the efficacy of learning and the accessibility of learning and the agility of learning. There's some other key elements that I would say define a good digital learning experience. It should be micro, bite-sized consumption. It should be ruthlessly relevant, and we'll talk a lot about relevancy in a moment. It should be fun and interesting and engaging. It should be fairly easy to access and consume. It should be social. It should be curated. It should be stuff that I'm actually interested in. It should be continuous. It shouldn't stop. It should be sticky, meaning that the content itself is memorable and it resonates with people. It should be a diverse range of interactions and modalities. It should be pervasive. It should be everywhere and all the time. And it should be supported. Now, traditionally, supported in learning means I get some coaching or I have a facilitator in the room helping me. But what does that mean when we're talking about digital experience design? And so these are some of the things we're going to address. So these are what I would suggest are the tenets of good design. So look, just very quickly, I'm not going to talk as much about GP Strategies and our background in the company, but why is GP Strategies well positioned, and why am I well positioned to speak to you about this? Well, the reality is that the nature of our business is that over the years we have developed a huge team of instructional designers. We've got some chief technologists who are focused on vetting and improving technologies. We've got an innovation kitchen that pushes the limits of platforms as they emerge and tests them out around IT requirements, around privacy, around confidentiality, around accessibility, around true feature sets and capabilities. And we've got a lot of developers, and we develop lots of content every year. So the way our business evolved has put us in the forefront of this experience design. The other piece that really positions me well and us well is that we are technology agnostic and platform agnostic. We will come in, and where I really enjoy working is looking at a situation, a profile of a client, what's going on, what's their culture, what is their need, what is their desired outcome, and the luxury to be able to pick from a range of platforms on technologies or experiences, or even decide, is technology even relevant here? Maybe technology is not even the right choice, and be able to pull in what we think is important and what makes sense in order to meet those needs. So we're technology agnostic, which enables us to really be flexible with our solutions. So that's why, I think we're in a good position to talk about this. So let's move on, and now we've got a common definition. Let's start with the outcome of this experience we're going to explore. So the outcome, at a high level, the results. So this is for a large bank in Asia, headquartered in Singapore. It was for individual contributors. 91% of respondents highly recommend the experience to others. They plan to use, what they're learning to further their career development. There has been an average 10%, and that's actually now increased up to 20% with the most recent cohort who's moved through, increasing confidence scores across all program objectives. So this was from pre and post confidence and application assessments. Learners stepped up and openly shared, generated their own videos, their own discussions, answered questions, participated well in any live events. And 25% earned the extra mile badge, and you'll know a little bit more about that when I continue to reverse engineer this for you. But, this is a badge that you earn for not just completing all of the content, but going the extra mile and participating in discussions and doing things that are optional. So that doesn't really tell the full story. The real story here is, what was the learning experience? We had learners who came into this, and you can read these on the screen, but we had learners who came into this who were, into this experience, who were facing some challenges, having conflict with other employees or clients, worrying about if they're in the right career or job or company. We had an employee who was in, an IT-related role, but always wanted to kind of dabble their hand, try their hand at investment banking. And so through this experience and a module within this around growth mindset, they were able to bring that context of where they are at in their life, in their career, and they, by the end of the 3-month experience, had switched careers within the company. So it's the stories that really make this a powerful experience, the changes that people made based on what they were learning and what they were consuming as they moved through this experience. So I keep on saying this experience. Well, let's start to break that down in a little bit more detail. So the program is called part of a suite of programs called Leadership Right by You. And Leadership Right by You is a leadership series of programs for individual contributors, first-line managers, and manager of managers. This experience is the version that we created for individual contributors. So the experience was characterized by starting with a live kickoff, then a 3-month digital experience broken into 1-month modules. So finding the trail, which was about, knowing yourself and understanding yourself. Trekking together was around, leading together, collaboration, communication, gaining support and commitment from others. And module 3, the last month of the experience, the digital experience, was around planning what's next. This is about resiliency, future readiness, really not being a victim of what's coming and looking ahead and trying to plan for that. And then we finished with a live half-day closing experience, which was really about, capturing stories of success and what did people do, what challenges did they experience, and also recognizing and rewarding people for their contributions. So a 3-month experience bookended by live experiences. Now, why were there live experiences? Why? How did we decide on timing? How did we decide on this trekking, hiking theme? How did we decide on the module and content focus? That is really the art of digital experience design, and that's what we're going to break down today. So let's have a look. Here is a quick screenshot of what it looks like, leading self, trekking towards success. This is the platform, and I'm going to actually jump in now and give you a bit of a demo of the platform. So let me just open this up here. And so I'm going to show you I'm not going to show you a lot of it, but I'm just going to show you some key elements of this experience. So give me one moment and I will share. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see now, I've got my browser open and I have the platform here. And I'm going to go into what the platform is and why it was chosen later. Right now, we're starting with the end product, right? So you're just going to see this as the learning experience. So you've got a tile-based interface. Across the top, you have Start here, which is where the first bit that launches, that people orient themselves to this experience and start to build the what's in it for me. There's videos from the client and trying to set the context, set the scene, create the urgency. Journey details is a place to find my resources for the entire journey. We've got a leaderboard, which I'll show you in a minute, which tracks people's progress and scores and badges that they've earned. And then down the bottom here, you've got each month, finding the trail, trekking together, and planning what's next. And these are time released. Again, another decision that was made based on an agile design process and a design thinking development process. So this is a carousel that as I move through it, I can go week by week. So each carousel screen is another week of content within that month. So let's start here. Let's have a look in the start here. So if I click on start here, you can see that you've got some videos here from the coach, and we'll talk about the coach as like this is our version of a facilitator in this experience. You've got polls, you've got a video from a senior leader from the bank, and then there's an accordion structure. So all of these tiles are in accordions, and I can access this content in any order I want. I can start at the bottom, I can start at the top, I can really go anywhere I want through this experience. Let's jump into the first week of content. This is called Finding the Trail. This module was about engagement, being accountable for your own engagement, and about having a growth mindset. You can see we've got some curated video content. We've got another video from a coach. We've got a journal that people can download and fill out. We've got also a discussion, which I'll load up here, which this discussion is, hey, come up with a hashtag that represents growth mindset for you, and so people can like and comment on each other. So it's a very social experience. Another piece here is that you have the leaderboard. So this is actually a completed experience. You can see William Ho here came out on top by just a fraction of a margin, and people earn points from completing content, but also earn extra points from participating in discussions, posting questions, going the extra mile by, instead of writing something, recording a video, because we want it to be interactive. And you've got a my cohort function, because within these groups were quite large. We had 300 plus people in each cohort, and here we're trying to address a population of 10,000 people. So we wanted to make sure that people felt connected, and so we had micro cohorts. So within this wider cohort of 300, we had groups of 5 to 7 people who formed micro cohorts. And again, that decision was made through careful consideration of the design process. So look, that's a super high level version of the platform, a quick demo, and let's go into why we chose it and how it all comes together. Okay, so there's a few buckets that I think we need to look at here. How do we get to success, right? A lot of people, a lot of clients, a lot of our company, GBSH, we want to get to success. But the process to get to success isn't a straight line, and especially when doing something new like this within a business, it's also not. It's even more complicated. But to get to that success, you need a good learning experience, and that learning experience is a culmination of a range of decisions, and those decisions could fall into several buckets. What is the platform or technology that's going to be used, if any, is going to be used? What content and modalities are best used for this population, in this company, in this culture? What are the design constraints? What are the things we need to know about? How much time can users be prepared to look at this? Over what time scale? What are some things they can and can't do? What is the level of readiness? What are some constraints that we need to be aware of? And finally, how do we engage this population? And engagement is true whether you're sending someone to a one-day public training session in a classroom, or whether you're doing e-learning. Engagement is always center to making sure learners carry through the experience effectively. So, but again, how did we make those decisions? Well, the next layer down from that is you've got these other layers. First you have the project brief. So this is kind of where we started. What was the first thing we learned about that business in terms of what the requirements were and what the desired outcomes were? And then you lay on top of that, what is the culture of that country, in this case, Singapore and Asia broadly? What is the culture of that company? And even more important than that, what is the learning culture? We need to know that, because what is the readiness of this organization and the culture of learning to accept this type of learning? Because this affects your design decisions. This affects how you attack it. Who are the learners? What drives these learners? What's interesting for these learners? How do we make this relevant for these learners? And then sitting above all of that are some broad guiding design principles that drive success. So that's really, this part down the bottom here is really what we're going to focus in on to help you understand, because once you start with that, then you need to go from the bottom to the top with a really strong design and development process. And you can see I have in the background here an agile kind of map here, just to give you a hint that we used an agile development process to get there. So let's start breaking this down. But to put it in a nutshell, for the project brief, our client basically said to us, we want you to move a huge population of people, the middle bell curve of our business, our individual contributors. We want you to move them forward using digital. We want to have cohorts of 300 people. We want it to be stretched. We want it to be micro. We want it to be, we want it to have diverse interactions. But we also need you to acknowledge that there's huge pressure for us to change. Because, anyone, even if you're not in the banking sector, you must know that banks are under huge degree of disruption, whether it's from the way that clients are interacting with banks or whether it's internally the automation and other factors that are changing the roles and the ways in which work is carried out within a bank. So there's a huge pressure to change the learning culture. And this program was going to be the first test of changing that learning culture, getting people introduced to the new way of learning, that you're accountable for your learning, that you need to be learning every day, that you're not going to be kind of handheld in your learning. Other challenges that had never been done before, that people, both leaders, managers of individual contributors and individual contributors themselves, and the learning team were for varying degrees of skeptical about this type of training, about this type of learning. Digital learning kind of was a bit of a dirty word in the business. Because when people thought of digital, they thought of that e-learning that they had to do by November 7th that was a compliance training, and it was maybe quite boring and a point and click, and it felt like a box ticking exercise. The country and the culture is very hierarchical, top-down culture. So, how do you tell individual contributors, hey, this is your learning journey, this is for you, go and do it, learning is up to you, when normally it's traditionally been something that's been a top-down approach. And huge risk for both the learning team and for GP strategies and for those involved in jumping into this, the cost, the risk, the investment, the high visibility of it. So it wasn't just, hey, let's go and change the culture and let's do this learning experience. It was all these pressures that we had to try to address, and each one of these affected our design decisions. So let's talk about that. Let's start off with the design process. So this is probably really important to understand the design process, because this helps you understand the way in which decisions are made and the key factors that we're using to help push our decisions in a certain direction, the key guidelines that help us make those decisions. So let's start with those guiding principles. To make an effective digital learning experience. Now, these are specific for this business, but they are broadly applicable. When you're making a digital learning experience, you have to achieve these things, because just because you've built something doesn't mean that people necessarily come back. This is all about making sure people come back. So you have to establish relevancy. It has to be real. It has to be urgent. It has to be linked not just to, oh, this is an interesting bit of content, but it has to be interesting in my context. We have to create connections between the people in the experience, maybe some learners, maybe there has to be a connection from a moderator or some other learner engagement specialist, a community manager, but there has to be connections. It has to be engaging. There has to be a respect of people's time, of people's priorities, of why am I spending this time in the first place? Because remember, this is going to be a self-led learning experience. No one is sitting there saying, do this at this time by this date. You can consume as much or as little of this experience as you want. So how does the organization, the bank, and GP strategies work together to make sure that people want to experience as much as possible? What we've essentially got to do is replicate the pool that makes you as a listener want to go onto YouTube and look something up when you need it. No one's making you do it because you want to. We want to create that same sensation in people. We've got to generate pull. So unlike a scheduled traditional training where there's a date and a time and there's a facilitator leading you through the process from morning to afternoon, this experience is completely self-led, so it can't just be pushed. There might be some push dimensions, but there's a lot of pull that has to happen. And you already saw a gamification layer in there that helps to create some of that pull, but there's so much more than that, and we'll break that down in a minute. And finally, you have to collect data, because these experiences shouldn't be something that you finish, you lock it up, and you say, here is the finished package. You should be always looking at the data, looking at what people are saying, looking at how people are interacting, looking at what people are not interacting with, looking at the questions that people are asking, both during the experience and during a post-mortem afterwards, and using that data to evolve the experience either on the fly or in agile review cycles in between each cohort. So these are the guiding principles of digital design that we want to try to achieve. And when I talk about digital design, I'm talking about the experience design. There's another layer here, which is learner and business outcome-centric design. I'm going to focus on the learner centricity aspect of it, but both the learner and the business are crucial. Learner centricity is really, really important in this sense because unlike, like I said, a traditional experience, this is user-driven, user-generated. This is self-led. If I can't establish relevancy, if I can't create connections, if I can't generate pull, then it's not going to be effective. And if I don't know who those learners are, and if I don't have the learners at the center of my design, then how am I going to be sure that I know how to generate pull? How can I be sure that I know how to make sure that I'm being ruthlessly relevant? So learner-centric design is paramount in digital experience design, especially where it's a self-led learner experience. And I would suggest that learner-centric design is crucial for any learning. Let's be honest, even though we try to say we have the learners in the center, a lot of design decisions and learning decisions are made because a business leader or somebody has said, hey, we need to improve our sales, or hey, we need to do this. And maybe that's true. The business does need it. But how many times do we put the learners in the center and say, who are these learners? How do they learn? Where do they learn? What are their priorities? What's their home life like? How much time do they have? What are their challenges? You know, how often do we really do that? Often we put the content in the center. We often say, okay, we need the negotiation skills, or we need a leadership training that focuses on delegation. And we put that in the center, and then we just try to vet vendors, or we try to build out content that then tries to meet that content requirement and some broad learning objectives. Learner-centric design is another level. And the way that we achieve that is by using a true design thinking process. So we have to empathize, and I'll talk more about how we achieve that. This is where we get that learner centricity going. We have to define the parameters, then we have to ideate, and then we have to kind of build and test to make sure that we've made the right decision. And this is really important. Here's what the actual design and development process look like. And you'll see I've kind of got two phases of build and test, and I'll explain why in a moment. The first phase is empathize. And so here is where we do that analysis of what is the business, the learners, and the culture that we're about to experience. And in the empathize phase, we actually build out learner personas. These learner personas, and here are just some examples. I can't show you the bank's real learner personas that we created, but we created 4 learner personas were the final amount. And this was also an iterative prototyping process where we didn't just come up with, you know, imagine these learner personas should be like points of a compass. If I have a population of 10,000 learners, what is the north, east, southwest, or even the north, northwest, and, you know, depending on how many you need of that learner population, we need to know that. Are there revenue generators? Are there non-revenue generators? Are there people who are new or people who are more senior? Are there people who are, you know, really early into their career and quite, you know, a different generational gap perhaps? What are the different factors? How do people get to work? Are people married and have kids and have a different work-life balance requirement to someone who doesn't? And how does all that feed into learning? So get these learner personas, because as you'll see later, this helps us pick right from the start what technology we're going to use, what content we're going to use, how are we going to make it applicable, how do we engage these people, how much time can I expect these learners, to spend on each learning moment when we engage them. So it affects everything. How ready are they? And then, so once we know the learners, the culture, then we can start to think about selecting the platform, defining the parameters, establishing our success criteria. Then we can go into ideate. And so to do this, we actually do a hackathon. So here's a photo of the actual hackathon that we do, where we actually work with the learning team to build prototypes using Post-it notes live on the fly. Right? So we actually map out what could module 2 look like, how are we going to do this? And meanwhile, we've got our learner personas there and our business outcomes and the culture of the business, and we're using those as measuring sticks. We're coming back and we're saying, hey, so this is a really cool activity you've got here. Maybe looking at these ones here around active listening. But how will John, because when we do these learner personas, we give them names and photos. How will John react to that? How will make this relevant to John? How do we make this relevant to Michelle? You know, Michelle says that she doesn't want to use her own data on her own mobile device to do company training. How do we navigate that? Tim, he works in a branch. Tim doesn't have access to his own terminal. He has to do everything on his own device. How do we design for that? And so we use these learner personas right from the start to help vet and test right at the beginning, how effective are we doing it. So the hackathon is hugely important. Now, another layer here, if you remember some of the cultural challenges we faced, that this was really new. There was a lot of resistance. People didn't get what this was about. And so specifically for this client, what we did is we worked together to invite not just the project team, the central learning team, but we invited learning people and leaders from around the bank who really didn't have a lot to do with it to be a part of this hackathon. Why? Because this was about change management. We needed to make sure that people got this, that people were invested and bought into it. And I can tell you, it created a lot of complication, a lot of stress. But by the end of it, there was in the middle of these hackathons, there's inevitably a moment where everyone's throwing their hands up in the air in frustration. But we all came up and we're in a circle singing Kumbaya by the end. So the hackathon is a hugely important piece. And then you'll notice I have a kind of a close of the first cycle of design thinking, which is where you kind of test your assumptions and build the first prototype. And we did that. Then that is the end of a design thinking process. Then we move into the actual development, which is agile, rapid sprints, rapid feedback, testing, user testing, voice of the learner sessions, and we're kind of constantly building. So instead of a traditional gated process for design, where maybe if you've done e-learning development before, where you have like a design document and then an alpha and then a beta and then go. Here, we're building it, we're testing it. Sometimes we're blowing it up and starting again, or sometimes we're just tweaking a little bit, but we're going back and we're doing concentric circles, getting smaller and smaller until we get to what good looks like. And that process continues even now 2 years after the launch. We're into the 1,000th people starting this process, this experience now, and we're still tweaking it and making it better and getting better experiences from the learners. So that is the design and development process. So now you understand that we have some core guiding principles of relevancy, establishing push and pull, making sure that we're respecting people's time, generating connections. That we understand these learners and the culture. Now you can start to understand some of our design decisions. So let's talk about one of those key design decisions, which is selecting the platform and technology. Now, this is an area that a lot of you listening will have encountered before, where maybe you're just trying to pick an LMS. Maybe you've already got an LMS and you thought your LMS could do everything, but it turns out it's really good at some things and probably not so great at other things. Maybe you're being bombarded with a lot of different technologies out there. You've got really great technologies out there that can help you with content curation, that can help create user-generated, user-driven learning ecosystems. You've got ones out there that are mobile-driven. You've got gamification platforms. You've got mobile coach up here, which I love, which we use to support a wider experience, to layer with another digital piece, to where it creates an AI layer of engagement for mobile messaging and some quick polls and stuff. There's so much to this that an organization needs to consider, and often this is where people get stuck. If you do effective design thinking, if you do effective learner personification, if you do effective analysis of your company culture, and you have a clear idea of what learning culture you want and where your business needs to go, it becomes quite easy to select these. But let's be honest, a lot of companies don't have the time, or maybe don't have the buy-in from enough of the business to actually make a cohesive company-wide decision. A lot of organizations, you've got a learning team that has a directive to say, we know as a business we need to change, we need you to go out and do it, but I've got 30 different functional senior leaders across 20 different countries. I've got all of these things. How do I engage all those people? And so the way that this organization went is, let's start with a project and we will kind of go in through the back door. We will pick a population, we will analyze that population that represents a good segment of our business, and we'll build for that, and we'll test, and we'll in a sense go in a reverse way and figure out what our learning culture is, what works by developing a project. We call it the low-hanging fruit approach. So the platform that was chosen here was a platform called Intrepid Learning. And you just saw the demo a bit earlier here. So Intrepid is characterized by it's a cohesive learning experience. It would be a type of MOOC, if you will, except you can have 30 people, 60 people, 5,000 people. You can have whatever number of learners you want go through it at one time. It can be time released, or it can just all the content can be open at one time. It's got gamification layers. It's got microtized elements. And if you remember some of the needs that I spoke about from this client, some of those needs were around, we want 300 people to go through per cohort. We need to hit 10,000 people. We need it to be self-led. We need it to be microtized. We need it to be diverse. We need it to also be something that people can access from a mobile or a PC, because not everyone is going to use both. We can't rely on that. We can't rely on people using company data or their own private data. So all of those factors, the culture, the learner personas, the business requirements, all of that fed into this decision. And this is a crucial decision that you need to make as you're embarking on digital experiences and digital experience design. But let me say this, just because you picked a platform doesn't necessarily mean success. Now, I ask another question often to a bunch of learners, and these are all really powerful platforms in their own right. You've got Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, lynda.com, which is now with LinkedIn Learning. You've got Udemy, you've got Skillsoft. And I want you to think about, have you worked with or are you currently working with any of these platforms? So I ask this question, and I ask a question, what is the average degree of utilization by learners in your organization? And I do this poll, and often most scores tend to come in around the low and average range. And there is a reason for that. And that is because while it's true that these platforms, I'm not degrading these platforms, they are super effective. GP strategies themselves, we use LinkedIn Learning internally. They do contain a lot of these elements. They actually lack some other elements. And so this is really what we're getting to here, is the difference between a content or platform focus. Hey, let's deploy LinkedIn Learning. Hey, let's deploy Intrepid. Hey, let's deploy SuccessFactors and make that our be-all and end-all. Just because you've deployed a platform doesn't mean that people are going to come back to it. Doesn't mean people are going to click and log in. And that's because the gap is, once you've got a platform, you need to think about, what is your learner experience? How are we going to design an experience that is cohesive, that makes people come back? And I want to kind of jump back up here to these guiding principles. So let's take LinkedIn Learning. So I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn Learning, but as you can see here, I might have watched a video on LinkedIn Learning about how to manage a P&L. But where is the layer that takes managing a P&L in general to layering a P&L in my company, in my group, in my division? Where is that ruthless relevancy, right? How do I access it? How is it being curated and making sure that what is out there is being funneled to me, a bit like what YouTube does. It knows what you're into and it shows you stuff. Where is that layer? How are you generating pull? How are you pulling me back? Once I've clicked in and we've launched it, how are you pulling me back? What data are you collecting to make sure that the program, that the experience and the platform is being effective? So content and platform focus is not enough. You need to really think about the experience in which you're designing. And this could be for a very specific project like the one we're talking about today, the leading self-individual contributors, or it could be very broadly around how a learner is going to interact on a company-wide level. How do they access learning? Why do they access? How do I link multiple layers of platforms together to create a seamless experience? Where's my gamification layer coming from? Where is my chat and social layer coming from? Where is my programmatic layer? Like Intrepid is a good program layer, but it doesn't necessarily do some other things really well, such as last for many years continuously curating content. Other platforms do that better. Where's my mobile engagement coming from? So these are questions you need to ask. So let's jump into a couple of other decisions. We're kind of nearing the end here. That's probably the first big decision is that I hope you can help navigate this platform. Some of the design parameters. Well, I've already kind of mentioned some of these. The learner personas helped us affect our design decisions. So the decision was made based on the business and the learners and how much time they could spend away from work. Each week of content was no more than an hour and a half to 2 hours, and each individual tile, each individual activity or learning action was no more than 5 minutes long. And it had to be designed from an experience flow perspective where it didn't demand that people left and come back and left and come back. People need to be able to do it all in one hit if they wanted, or that they could come in and come out whenever they wanted as well. And this was, again, based on disruption to work. We had to put a sense of progression. So here is an example of an ongoing evolution. So initially for this experience, we had badges were earned. You couldn't see which badges you earned. You earned them surprise as you earned points, and as you completed things, you would earn badges. Sometimes we would award ad hoc badges based on really outstanding contributions or progression. But what we did is we tweaked because we felt like we wanted to see a greater sense of progression that people could track and follow. And so what we ended up doing is in later experiences, we redesigned it where people could see all of the badges that they could earn up front, and as they earned them, they changed color. So that is a way to, in a sense, create a bit of a pull factor, but also show me that, hey, there's more to do, there's more to see. And that's had a big impact. And we use that based on data of engagement and learner interaction. and also feedback from the business around their desire to see a greater sense of reporting on progression. Internet and computer access, which are already addressed, and peer and manager involvement. Normally for individual contributors, my goal is that I would love to see individuals engage with their manager. But in this case, we couldn't rely on individuals to engage their managers because different managers were at different levels of development themselves. And so if we built it around, hey, go and get this from your manager, go and engage with your manager, there was concern from the client that it wouldn't work. So we built it in a way that they could be completely self-sufficient from their manager and still be extremely effective learning experiences. So look, this is just a few of the parameters that were put into the design that then affected the decisions that we made. The next layer is content and modalities. So I already showed you, I haven't showed you the final content, but here's the original brief that we received. So module 1, self-awareness, goals, personal and organizational goals alignment, task management, work-life balance and integration. Module 2, it's personal effectiveness, working styles, communication, influence, getting future ready, embracing change, innovation mindset, design thinking. So this was where it started, but through the design process. So this is what we were first given, but and this is a bit scary for some organizations. Normally in a learning environment, when you're engaging with an external partner like GP Strategies, you want to see the end product before you choose your vendor. You want to say, hey, show us what week 1 and what's in hour 1 and hour 2 and what happens in the morning or what happens in afternoon tea, what time is lunch. People want to see a breakdown, but because this is an agile process, this is a learner-centric process, we didn't know that from the start. What we ended up selling was our process, our capacity for design, our ability to make sure that we were going to arrive at what good looks like. And so here's what good looked like in the end. Through jumping in deeper and understanding the business, the learners, the culture, really self-awareness became about growth mindset, my strengths, my values. How do I understand what my values are and how they drive my engagement and get more of that at work? That was more important based on, say, things like affecting attrition and learner engagement, but employee engagement. How do I take ownership and be accountable for my own growth and career? That was an evolution from the original design. Module 2 was more about network. How do I create a network that will then help me be resilient, that will help give me the development opportunities, that will help give me access to knowledge that I need to thrive in my job, right? So it really evolved. And so yes, communication was a part of it and understanding work styles was a part of it, but it was really about building a network and then knowing how I gain support from that network. And then, so the last piece was around getting future ready. So what started off as about design thinking and very high level pieces, which are all very valuable. Really, what does design thinking mean to a branch teller who is processing transactions every day? Really, what that person wants to know is what's coming? What are the disruptions? I want to take time and have a process to analyze where I am relative to these upcoming disruptions. And I want to make a plan for how to get there. So you can see how things evolve from where it started to where it is today. There's a huge evolution. And again, learner centricity, understanding business challenges and understanding learning culture, the business culture were crucial for deciding on this. We also had live events. Now we create a whole range of stretched learning experiences on Intrepid and other platforms around the world. We've got another one with a large pharmaceutical that has 5,000 people going through it at one time, right? But what's really interesting here is that we decided to put a live event into this, and this was a collaboration between us and the client. And the reason why we put live events in and what we put in that live event is because it was so new, because it had never been done before. There was a deep concern, even a fear that gosh, we're going to launch this and no one's going to click on it, no one's going to come back. There might be a barrier to the technology. People feel uncomfortable, unfamiliar with the technology. So we built this live experience for a reason. This increased the cost of the project. Right? So it's not just cost spending for spending's sake. It's spending because design demands it. So in this case, the live session was about engaging people. It was dealing with the resistance of a traditional hierarchical top-down, do this learning, my manager sent me to do it, to making it about, hey, no one's going to tell you to do this. This is for you. We are investing in you. We believe in you. You are the glue for our business. But it was also about, we integrated the actual platform into the live experience. So we got people to log in and participate in polls and upload photos and generate their own content and consume some content and do some of that things, do some of that stuff live. So it got rid of the barrier of lack of familiarity. People went out going, this is easy, I can access it. So that live experience, again, was that decision, that investment was made for a reason. The 5,000 person global leadership experience that I mentioned earlier with a pharmaceutical company, that just had a 90-minute webinar kickoff because the culture of that business was different and the readiness level was different. You know, we curated a lot of content in. It wasn't just using the GB Strategy suite of leadership and professional development content, of which there was a lot of that leveraged, but we're also able to curate content and pull that in. We had our coaches pull in content and on the fly based on questions and drop that in for people to experience based on things that were coming up. So the experience itself was living and breathing. And of course, there was a custom content layer as well. Sometimes, in order to make content fit this modality, we had to change it. So we have a program for first-line managers that's based on, that's called around the trust continuum, how low-level, high-level trust impacts relationships and decisions that you make when you're communicating with people. So, you know, initially we had a lot of a workbook with text in it, but that text wasn't really very engaging when you got a digital platform and you're not in a classroom and I can't make you read it, right? So what we ended up doing is we built a custom HTML5 asset that launched from within the platform where people could then just click on these relationships and then physically move a dial along the trust continuum from low, medium, high trust and see how one situation plays out 3 different ways depending on trust. So from that little interaction, they got everything they needed to know about the importance of trust in relationships. You know, we built a custom communication style. We know that normally has 60 questions. We dropped it down to 10 questions because, again, how much time can we really expect these people to spend on the platform? So customizing content, building new content is another crucial layer to this that is respectful to learners, the business, the platform, all of those different elements. And the final piece I want to touch on as we wrap up here is learner engagement. This is the push and the pull factor. So yeah, we had a gamification layer, which I mentioned. You can see an example of a badge there. We had an award ceremony at the end. That's actually dropped off now, that we do that digitally in the more recent versions. We don't do a live capstone anymore. We also have a social layer. So I already mentioned there's discussions, but the coach is in there, that we have subject matter coaches, which I'll show you in a moment, who go in and participate in these discussions. We had people form teams. And these teams each had names, so we had a team score. So there wasn't just the individual leaderboard, there was the team leaderboard. And that was another push and pull to help make sure that, oh gosh, my team score is low. I know that it's my score that's holding my team back. I'm going to step up, right? And so we had them connect, form WhatsApp or messenger groups, whatever it was. They went and met and had coffees and lunches and supported each other. So there's that creating connection layer. You can see me meeting those guiding principles. And it was definitely supported. So we had park rangers, also known as moderators or community managers. So GP provided and continues to provide a moderator who's there to look at the data, to send out emails and engage people, to jump on the platform, communicate with people, see what people are doing well. Maybe a learner wasn't on for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and we're worried about their score and their lack of participation. And then they've jumped on and they've caught up and they've shot up the leaderboard. We want to see that, and we want our moderator to send a personal email to that person and say, hey, by the way, we've seen what you've done. Thank you so much. Maybe someone's gone above and beyond and recorded a video sharing a really powerful experience. We want to recognize that. We want to make a custom badge, award additional points. Maybe they need technical support, so the moderator plays a crucial role in connecting and engaging. And the trail guides or the coaches are there listening to questions, recording videos on the fly, dropping content in, participating in discussions, and making sure that their people are, learning from them and drawing on their experiences. So I kind of want to summarize here and just jump up to these guiding principles. Establish relevancy, create connections, respect time, generate pull, and collect data. Hopefully you can see through the design process, the learner centricity enabled us to figure out how we're going to do that. That a lot of decisions that we made around live sessions, around what the content should focus on, around how long the content should be, how long the experience should be, what technology we choose, all of that comes from learner centricity, understanding business outcomes and culture, and having and respecting these guiding principles throughout the experience. If you are able to do this, I believe that you will not only create good experiences for your learners, but you will also more successfully manage your investment as digital learning takes off within your business. And because of all the pressures, the need for agility, the speed at which people learn, it is taking off if it hasn't already. So to summarize, here are some key takeaways I'd like you to walk away with. Number one, great content or technology doesn't always equal great outcomes. Just because it's interesting content doesn't mean learners are going to click on it in a self-led world. And even in a classroom environment, just because it's interesting doesn't mean at the end when learners are doing their happy sheet evaluations that they're going to give it great scores. They're going to say this was interesting, but that score around is it applicable to my work will be low. So it is broad, but it's especially important in digital self-led experiences where you're not hand-holding people. You need to think about the experience that your learners are going to have, and to do that, you need to have the learners and your business in the center. So as an extension to that, learner-centric design and agile development are key to success. You've got to expect when you're working and developing on this, whether it's internally or with a partner like GP Strategies, that this is going to be an agile process. It's not, that the solution won't be known up front, that it's going to be a contact sport, right? The hackathon, it's going to be really collaborative, and it's going to be a deep partnership to get to a really great outcome. The evolution is continuous. Make sure that your experience is not something that you lock up and put away once you feel like it's built, that you should be constantly looking at what's happening. How can I tweak it? How can I drive costs down? How do I need to improve it? How do I need to adjust the content, the flow, the timing? You need to know your culture and design with that in mind. Often, especially when this is a new process, something you're embarking on for the first time, change management is key. You've got to think about that up front. When do I engage the business? How do I engage the business? How can I use our experience of my own team, or by my own team, I mean your team, or our partners' experience to help communicate that? I go around for my partners, for our clients around Asia, and I run this roadshow where I teach some similar things in here in a different way, just so to help my partners, my learning teams get out into the business, what digital learning is, to break some of the shackles of old thinking. So those roadshows have been hugely important in change management, even when they're not working on a project with us. Ruthless relevance and the balance of push and pull are crucial. If it's not ruthlessly relevant, people don't care, they don't come back. And if there isn't the right balance of push and pull, another reason why people don't come back. So just because you've thrown a technology or some content out there and you're wondering why people are not coming back and clicking on it, you've got to think about ruthless relevance and the right balance of push and pull. And that's going to be informed through your learner personas and through your understanding of the business and its culture. And finally, and this is really an important one, this is near and dear to my heart, stronger the partnership and trust, stronger the outcome. The client that we just spoke about, this large bank, the trust and the partnership is really, really deep. We're extremely transparent with each other. There's a lot of trust around this. And in fact, one of the mantras of the project from day one was trust the process, trust the process, trust the process, because it was uncomfortable for everybody. Because we're starting with what good looks like and building there. Here we're building progressively what good looks like. So strong partnerships and trust on both sides of the GP Strategies or the vendor and your learning teams or your organization are crucial. So look, I hope this has been a really interesting webinar for you. I hope that you have learned a little bit about how decisions are made. I know in this case we focus on Intrepid, which is a great platform which we have a deep partnership with. But hope you see the importance of, it's not just technology, that there's an experience design that goes in there, and that to build that experience, there are certain key things that go into the center. So look, I'm just going to finish up here and leave my contact information. You can see my email address here, bkier@gpstrategies.com. If you have any questions and you want to ask any questions about this experience or in general about learning strategy, learning design, how to deploy leadership and professional development in these types of contexts where it traditionally hasn't worked, I'm happy to field those questions. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.